Go. Welcome, everybody, to Geezy Truth News. We have our important guest and our reliable Dr. Jim Fetzer here telling us all the news, all the updates. We're going to learn and figure everything out. Thank you so much for being here. It's July 27th, 2026. Let's figure it all out, Jim. What have you learned and what's going on?
Well, there is a lot going on, my friend, including all hell breaking loose in the Middle East because while Trump has been using the Saudis as a covert way to obtain oil and keep the price down, the Houthis have now attacked the largest oil field refinery in Saudi Arabia and
In
interdicted
order to be a complete thinker, you have
their
to nurture both sides of your brain.
pipeline.
The technical side
The
or the quantitative.
situation is
canceling elections.
directly. This is
Blanksmith engine has been
we
quite
have
helpful in
Alistair Crook
streamlining
talking about
the enormous amount of
here.
traces that we'd otherwise have to look at manually. And so aggregating these traces to
But actually, every step is actually doing the opposite. It is actually making the possibility of negotiations impossible. I mean, put it bluntly, the risk, the chances of escalation are now higher than the chances of de-escalation. And we're getting to the point, and that's why I call it 3.0. We're getting to the point where the escalatory phase for Trump becomes uncontainable. He cannot contain the escalatory impulse in order to try and find a way down from his tree that he has climbed.
I want to talk to you today about what Alistair Crook, the former British diplomat and intelligence officer, has been saying, because he has been one of the few voices in the Western media who has actually been telling the truth about what's happening on the ground. And what he's describing as a regional war that has spiraled completely out of control, leaving Donald Trump panicking, boxed into a corner with no off-ramp in sight. Let me set the scene for you. Over the past few days, especially last night, we have seen a dramatic escalation that has opened an entirely new front in this conflict. The Yemeni armed forces have launched massive coordinated missile and drone strikes deep inside Saudi Arabia. We are not talking about skirmishes along the border anymore. We are talking about dozens of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones targeting the crown jewels of the Saudi economy, the Aramco oil facilities. NASA fire maps have confirmed our geolocation. The Aramco refinery in Jazan is in flames. Multiple large fires are burning out of control at that facility, and this is not just limited to Jazan. The Yemeni military has also targeted the East-West pipeline in Yanbu and the King Khalid Air Base in Khamis Mushait. This is a message, and it's a very clear one. There is no place in Saudi Arabia that is effectively protected anymore. Now, before I go any further, I need to ask you something. If you are watching this and you care about honest journalism, if you want to hear the truth about what's really happening in the Middle East, please hit that.
Yeah, it's a pitch for us to support him, which of course is worthy, but the story there is absolutely vital. What it means is Trump's reliance on Saudi oil in order to keep the price of gas down has now been cut off. Here's a further report about it. Houthis attack Saudi tankers, bringing the crisis to a new level. This is a further where the Houthis are making a big, big difference. The unintended consequences of meddling in matters you have no idea about, or put more popular social media terms, effing around and finding out, is about to hit Donald Trump in the coming hours. Just shortly after Feb 28th, some pundits will still remember how he whined at White House press wasters that he was shocked how Iran would hit U.S. bases in the Gulf Coast countries. Now expect a different shock regarding the Houthis and the Bab el-Mandeb, as this group just destroyed 2 Saudi oil tankers who dared to pass through the straits. This is a new kind of Dante's hell now for Donald Trump and Western leaders as the escalation trap is cranked up. The stakes are now denying Saudi Arabia its oil revenues from exports. KSA can no longer even use its pipeline to the Red Sea anymore. presumably MBS and his cronies, are not body slamming one another after they decided that bombing the Houthis was a smart idea. The Houthis have proven to be unbelievably courageous. I am so impressed. Kevin Barrett has picked up on the theme, moreover, reporting about it. Houthis blockade Saudi's Red Sea closed for renovation on July 20th. Yemen's Ansar Allah government, these are the Houthis, the bravest and most principled in the Arab world, closed the Red Sea to Saudi, U.S., and Israeli shipping. They slammed Bab el-Mandeb shut exactly 1 week after the Saudis bombed Sandair Airport, that's their major airport, to prevent a flight from Tehran from landing. That flight was carrying Ansar Allah officials who attended the momentous, massively attended funeral for the supreme leader of Iran, Imam Ali Khamenei, the spiritual leader of tens of millions throughout the region and throughout the world. Memo to Trump: murdering spiritual leaders revered by tens, if not hundreds of millions, is probably not a good idea. He's got it exactly right. This is all backfiring very badly. Trump's in a new stage of the war, and it's getting increasingly desperate. Your thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, well, my thoughts is, what can I say? There's not much I can say besides I feel like all of this is money making. To me, it's all just money making. The people, the military contractors, the bankers, whoever's, at the top, who's ever funding all these wars and this and that, they're all just profiteering off all this stuff. Like General Smedley always said, General Smedley, Smedley
Butler,
yeah. All war is a racket. And so, all of this to me is just money making stuff. But of course,
well, Trump sometimes looks at it that way, but he's confronting a calamitous situation here because the U.S. has no way out. We could and ought to have acceded to the Iranian demands by accepting the memorandum of understanding. Instead, Trump contradicted himself, no longer has any credibility. He's increased the attacks. They've gone on for 11 days. Now they're finally getting a break in Iran. But he can either increase and suffer an even more humiliating defeat or withdraw now, which he could do most graciously by claiming it's in the interests of the world economy, that continuing the war with Iran because of the shutoff of both of the straits is going to lead to economic calamities worldwide, so that he graciously and compassion withdraws, because otherwise he's in a hole and he's just keeping digging, which is the worst possible outcome. Here we have additional reports. U.S. surge forces toward the Middle East, giving Trump options to expand the war. Everyone thought at the time he was going to launch this massive attack. Meanwhile, Iran keeps attacking U.S. bases, even as Trump threatens nuclear strikes. Here's Professor John Mearsheimer, who is so good. Let's hear a bit of what he has to say.
He's dead wrong. It's the Americans who can't be trusted. If you look at the 17 June Memorandum of Understanding, and the key issue here involves Article 5, who controls the Strait of Hormuz. In my opinion, Article 5 makes it clear that it is Iran that will be in control of the Strait of Hormuz for the 60-day negotiating period. And after that, the future of the strait will be decided between Oman on one side and Iran on the other side. The United States is not mentioned at all. And what the Trump administration tried to do after the Memorandum of Understanding was signed was create a channel in the Gulf, or to put it more specifically, to create a channel in the Strait of Hormuz that basically was American controlled and would allow ships to go through under the auspices of the United States and outside the auspices of the Iranians. And unsurprisingly, the Iranians said this was unacceptable and that it was a violation of Article 5 of the Memorandum of Understanding. The Iranians are correct. What that gentleman just said on Fox News is simply not true.
And so what about his comment there that we should be encouraged that President Trump has a resolution to this? So even though Iran is not doing what we want them to, forget about what the MOU actually said, but don't worry because we have escalation dominance. Do we?
Well, you want to remember that President Trump signed the Memorandum of Understanding on June 17th because he had no choice. The Iranians were winning the war, and the Iranians held all the cards when you went up the escalation ladder. And this is why President Trump signed what was effectively a surrender document. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is what's changed since June 17th that now gives us escalation dominance? I mean, if we had had escalation dominance before June 17th, we would have taken advantage of that and we would have used it to make sure we got a better agreement. The fact that we didn't take advantage of it meant we didn't have escalation dominance before June 17th. So the argument here is that something has changed. Well, I'd like to know what is that something that has changed. According to my calculations, we've been engaged in this tit-for-tat strategy since July 7th. Again, the Memorandum of Understanding was signed June 17th. We then welched on the deal, and you got this tit-for-tat strategy starting on July 7th, which is now taking place.
He's got it right. Nothing has changed. We don't have any escalatory dominance. Meanwhile, Iran keeps attacking U.S. bases, and get this, a new $32 million U.S. military logistic hub is nearly finished. So, of course, predictably, the Iranians are already taking it out. U.S. Air Force on the verge of completing construction of yet another military logistic facility in the Middle East, dubbed appropriately Cargo City. The airfield will support U.S. military ops in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan, the goals and end dates of which remain elusive. Adjacent to Kuwait International Airport, U.S. crews have dug through Kuwaiti soil to install new communication cables and antenna systems that will enable both the U.S. and Kuwaiti Air Forces to operate out of Cargo City, which will be the main aerial debarkation point in the Middle East. U.S. Air Force 386th Expeditionary Wing announced in a July 5th news release. The construction of the $32 million logistic hub has taken place during a time of massive expansion at the Kuwaiti International Airport. But the IGC has already struck it. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said Tuesday it set fire and destroyed the U.S. military main logistic and support hub in Kuwait. I mean, how could they even imagine they could get away with doing this? Meanwhile, Trump has paused major escalation over dwindling U.S. air defense missile stocks. He's finally realizing that America is running out of missiles. U.S. President Donald Trump has paused plans for now to sharply escalate military operation against Iran amid concerns about dwindling American air defense missile stocks, the New York Times reported Saturday. The decision followed a meeting Friday with senior advisors and cabinet officials. Military officials warned that renewed major combat operation could dangerously deplete Patriot interceptors and ammunition needed to protect U.S. troops and bases in Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE. The Trump admin is also concerned that further escalation could trigger heavier Iranian retaliation, alienate global allies, and worsen global energy and refugee crises, according to the newspaper. What could be more obvious? Meanwhile, General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, reportedly told officials a major op was feasible, but would sharply reduce the air defense munitions available to the U.S. military central command. The concerns have intensified after 3 soldiers in Jordan were killed when an Iranian ballistic missile penetrated American air defenses during a missile and drone barrage. And I'm quite confident they're minimizing the number of Americans dead, which I believe is already over 500. Meanwhile, as I was reporting, Iran now, first night without U.S. attack in actually 13 days. Iran reported its first night without a U.S. attack after 13 consecutive days of strikes, while U.S. Central Command also did not announce any overnight ops. Hossein Kermanpour, a spokesman for Iran's health ministry, said in a post on X, no attacks were recorded overnight. Casualty figures remained essentially unchanged. Fortunately, no attack was recorded last night, and therefore, the casualty statistics for the July war, apart from the discharge of a few more injured individuals, did not see any significant change. It seems our dear Iran had a peaceful night last night, and no part of its body was struck or hit. Iran's body is intact. Iran's head is healthy. CENTCOM, which had posted statements and social media updates after each of the previous 13 nights of strike, had not announced any new attacks as of Saturday morning. Meanwhile, a new surveillance commons means the end of military concealment. What is turning out is that various agencies are able to access aerial surveillance from satellites, even if they don't actually own satellites themselves. On February 26, 2026, 48 hours before the U.S. and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, Hengu-based Mizar Vision posted AI annotated satellite images of F-22 Raptors at Avda Air Base in Israel, carrier strike group positions in the Arabian Sea, and AWACS Air Force at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. The company does not own satellites. It purchases commercially available imagery from Western and non-Western providers and processes it through proprietary AI that identifies and categorizes military assets through automated object detection. Operation Epic Fury launched approximately 24 hours after one particularly significant imagery release. Mizar Vision continued posting throughout the campaign, including damage assessments after Iranian strikes on Al Udeid, THAAD battery repositioning in Jordan, and tanker aircraft location at bases across Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. The U.S. military classified many of its own force movements. Our Chinese commercial AI platform, however, published them on social media near real time. What this means is there's going to be no concealment. Both sides are going to know where all their positions, all their forces are located. It's going to intensify exchanges and make them even more devastating. Meanwhile, we have this SAB and Patriot exhaustion of missiles, the hard arithmetic behind Trump's off-ramp, meaning now slowing down the attacks. Trump's overnight panic on the Iran bombing run is not diplomacy. It's the sound of the empire of chaos, hitting the industrial brick wall at full throttle, while pretending it chose a downshift for a photo op via Omani intermediaries in Tehran. Axios can recycle the same sources all weekend about an off-ramp, a possible weekend deal to reopen Hormuz. But the real arithmetic is written in the empty canisters that PAC-3 MSE and THAAD interceptors already expanded. Between the opening phase of Operation Epic Fury and the latest 2 weeks night and day campaign, the U.S. had fired around 1,500 Patriot interceptors, more than half the pre-war reported stockpile of 2,300. Lockheed's production line, even after exorbitant emergency contracts, meaning paying them a fortune, is still crawling at 620 missiles a year, shared with every desperate basket case ally from Ukraine to the Gulf. Only 172 replacements have actually been delivered. Colonel McGregor was pointing this out months and months ago, that the U.S. was going to run out of missiles before the Iranians ran out of missiles. Here's another report now from Sonar 21. Did Trump taco again on Iran? Taco means Trump always chickens out. Did Trump taco again on Iran? Why? I spoke with Horton Friday, and I'll post a video available. Told him I fully expected Trump would deliver on his vow to open the gates of hell on Iran. All the warning indicators were flashing red. Europeans were closing their embassies, they were evacuating staff, major surge in U.S. aircraft into Israel, cancellation of civilian flights in and out of the Persian Gulf, flight of several P-8 Poseidon aircraft over the Persian Gulf, Israel opening at bomb shelters. But I failed to consider Trump was hosting a second try of the White House Correspondents Association dinner Friday night. I heard from a trusted source Trump had called off the attack planned for Friday, nor not to distract from his speech at the White House Correspondents' shindig. Okay, that meant Saturday would be the big day. But early on Saturday, I received a note from a source that two key military components, CENTCOM and FCENT, were not performing the operation prep and planning that would normally occur if a major attack were imminent. In fact, they were not coordinating. CENTCOM was even cutting events from its schedule for the weekend. Let me explain the acronyms. CENTCOM is a supported command for Operation Epic Fury. It's responsible for U.S. military ops, security cooperation, and contingency planning across a 20-nation area responsibility that spans the entire Middle East, Central Asia, and parts of South Asia. AFCENT, officially 9th Air Force, Air Force Central, serves as CENTCOM's dedicated air component. It plans, coordinates, and executes all air operation unilaterally with coalition partners in support of CENTCOM's objectives. To have sent official headquarters at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina, UDID has functioned as AFCENT primary forward operating location and forward headquarters in the CENTCOM area responsibility for many years. And what has happened here is they've cut it out because they're running out of missiles and we don't have the weapons to conduct the war. This is a travesty that was utterly predictable, utterly anticipatable, but Trump appears to have been so poorly informed he didn't see it coming. Now we have a further report from the Truth Seeker. Iran war. Trump must change course now to avoid another Vietnam. Like a slow-motion car crash, the U.S.-Israel attacks on Iran are morphing into a third Gulf War. Since signing a ceasefire deal, it clearly recognized Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. That was the Memorandum of Understanding, and forced Israel to halt military ops in Lebanon. U.S. President Donald Trump has slithered and backtracked his way out of both commitments, resuming a full-scale and increasingly bloody war. Both Trump and the man primarily responsible for pushing him into this war, Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu, were poorly received at home for the ceasefire deal. Trump because he actually signed it, Netanyahu because he was cut out of the process amid a sense that Israel's ally in arm war had imposed a premature peace. Neither leader could justify a deal that was seen as a major capitulation. Both face imminent elections, regard strong-arm tactics with Tehran as a matter of personal political survival. Both are stuck in a deep loop of their own making. As soon as their many claims to have smashed, obliterated, and crushed Iran were shown to be bogus, the only option was to go back and start the whole op all over again. But it has had no more success than before. Your thoughts, my friend?
You know, it's everything that you said. It's pretty much what I'm saying is that it's all just, I mean, it's all sad. It is what it is, but it's all just profiteering of the oligarchs. They're doing what they're doing. They're all very happy. They're all going to be fat cats. They don't care about the people dying or anything like that. So There's
Well,
multiple
Trump
sides to it.
himself, Trump himself has been talking about the military-industrial complex making lots of money. The problem is, what's happening is the utter humiliation of America as an international power, or our influence and standing in the world is being destroyed before our very eyes by our incapacity to win the war with Iran, which we should never have entered or engaged in the first place. So the consequences here are going to be enormous and consequential and endure for decades. I have no doubt whatsoever. Endure for decades. Let's pick up on a few other stories. Here we have Tucker talking about the National Defense Appropriation Act, which is presently stalled in the Senate. I'm happy to say the Senate is yet to confirm it. But get Tucker's take, which is
there's an effort in the Congress to merge the U.S. military with the Israeli military. Is it true? What do you know about it?
The National Defense Authorization Act provides for the integration of the IDF and the U.S. military at the top, most sensitive levels of our military operations. And so they're merging.
Of all the militaries you could merge with, why pick the only one on the planet that's currently committing genocide?
This was folded into the bill. Nobody knows who put it in.
We don't know who pushed it?
We know whose idea it was. Benjamin Netanyahu. He's taking credit for this.
He has?
Oh yeah, he says his idea.
It's literally treason. You're handing your government to a foreign government against the will of your own people who pay for everything. If there was ever a justification for shutting down Washington, it's this. There's an effort in the Congress.
Yes, I agree. If there were ever a justification for shutting down Washington, it's this. Meanwhile, Trump at the correspondents' dinner, where he delayed the attack, he went on a ramp insulting correspondents right and left. And at the end, he donned a Trump 2028 hat, suggesting he's going to run for president for a third time, which we all know is unconstitutional. There's some speculation he might plan to run as vice president and then have some kind of flip once in office. Meanwhile, Trump's new tariffs are going to cost Americans $100 billion a year. President Trump Thursday unveiled a new package of tariffs targeting 60 countries, accounting for over 99% of U.S. imports, a move that, upheld in court, would cost Americans an estimated $100 billion a year in the form of higher costs. The duties range from 10 to 12.5%, announced as part of the president's effort to maneuver around repeated court rulings against sweeping tariffs, including by the conservative-dominated U.S. Supreme Court. Meanwhile, Trump has also changed the rules on religious liberty. This is rather bizarre. The Trump admin just put every federal agency on notice. Religious liberty cannot be treated like an afterthought. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche issued a sweeping new Justice Department guidance telling the executive agency to account for religious freedom when they write regulations, enforce federal law, and manage employees, award contracts, and administer government programs. This is the first major rewrite of the federal government's religious liberty guidance in 2017. The memorandum carries practical instructions agencies must apply in real decisions. It gives agencies concrete instructions rooted in the First Amendment, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and a series of Supreme Court decisions, reaffirming the admin's commitment to safeguard the constitutional rights of religious individuals. That, of course, is something we would all endorse. Meanwhile, leftists continually refer back to January 6th every time another lunatic attacks ICE. What it is about January 6th, however, it was a completely fabricated event. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of FBI assets in the crowd. They were agents provocateur like Ray Epps. Trump had, in fact, at the mall, told his supporters to peacefully protest. Even the American Conservative published right off the bat that there was no incitement and there was no insurrection. This was completely generated by the Democrats to trash Trump as a political stunt. The doors to the Congress are electronically closed. Only high authority, particularly Nancy Pelosi, could authorize them to be open. And it appears to have been a scheme generated by Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the mayor of Washington, D.C., to embarrass Trump and to generate what was supposed to be, a basis for impeaching him. Grotesque, because completely unwarranted. Meanwhile, officials are admitting to canceling grants to states that didn't vote for Trump. This is so unbelievably un-American. I am embarrassed that it's happening whatsoever. Meanwhile, just to add a few more notes, Alan Dershowitz spent months demanding to testify about Epstein and then vanished 5 days before showtime. Dershowitz, I dare say, has a lot to hide. Here's something you need to know about Dershowitz before the committee gets him under oath. He defended Trump during the first impeachment trial. He wrote op-eds arguing Trump's legal positions were correct, and for the most part, I agree with Dershowitz, they were correct. He spent years on Fox, being introduced as a liberal who saw things clearly. That goodwill, however, doesn't mean a thing when you look at what he actually did for Jeffrey Epstein. Dershowitz was Epstein's lawyer, the architect of the most disgraceful plea deal in modern legal history. 2008, he helped negotiate an agreement to let Epstein plead guilty to state prostitution charges and walk away from federal sex trafficking indictments. And of course, as we know, the situation is a complete horror story. Here's Thomas Massey explaining why the Epstein files are still being hidden away.
Can I buy you a drink?
I'm good, thanks.
Cool. So,
Congressman Thomas Massey, thank you for being here. Great to see you.
Great to see you, Clayton.
Well, Congressman, the House is preparing to vote on the NDAA tomorrow. I want to talk about Epstein and everything else. But first, before we get into the details of that, I want to talk about the NDAA because the big vote tomorrow. What do you believe Americans need to understand about what Congress is about to approve right now? Many Americans out national parks, visiting, it's the last hurrah of summer. And quietly, sort of buried inside this enormous bill is Section 219, which, well, I'll give you the floor on what is about to happen in Washington.
Well, first of all, the NDAA stands for the National Defense Authorization Act. And it's one of the few bills that passes every year. I've been here 14 years. There have been 14 NDAAs. So you can set your clock on the fact that this bill will pass. So anything that gets in it is, dangerous as a cocked gun. It's going to become law. Well, this bill is hundreds of pages long. And, in one of those hundreds of pages, it's actually 5 pages long, is Section 219. And it was Section 224, but it's now Section 219. And it calls for the integration of our military technology and the supply chains that produce our, high-tech military equipment to be integrated with Israel's. Now, we don't have this kind of, bilateral agreement with any other country in the world, and I would argue that we shouldn't in order to protect our sovereignty and to protect our national secrets. If you wanted to share one thing at a time, let's say, we wanted to collaborate on missile defense systems, I think that's fine. The president can do that, just by virtue of controlling the military. But what they're doing here is legislatively, they are appointing a person. I joked that this person will eventually be a cabinet member, but right now it's a lower level position who will be in charge of the integration. And that means that this project will have a lifespan that outlasts the commander-in-chief. Regardless of who the next president is, this provision lasts forever. And it's in the National Defense Authorization Act. It's coming to a vote. A lot of people have, saw this. I saw this back in June and offered an amendment. By the way, there are 1,400 amendments that have been offered to the National Defense Authorization Act here in the House. My amendment was amendment number 2. I was the second person to offer an amendment to the NDAA, and that's because I saw this troubling provision in there. Now, what they've decided to do is they've decided to block my amendment. So there will be no vote and no debate on Section 219 and whether it should be in the NDAA or whether it should not be in the NDAA. And
of course, we know that it went ahead and passed in the House. The question is whether it's also going to pass in the Senate. The circumstances here are so dire that it represents the loss of American sovereignty should this pass. And I'm profoundly troubled. I've never seen a legislative act before in the history of the United States that would turn the responsibility for a major element of American power or authority over to a foreign nation. Should this happen, it will be a catastrophe. Bibi boasts about now he's going to have control of the American military. Ron Paul's observed instead of giving Israel $2 billion a year in foreign funding, we're going to give them access, if this should pass, to our $1.5 trillion military budget. Let us hope it doesn't happen. Monday, we may find out more, but I'm terribly troubled. This is greatest threat to the sovereignty of the United States in our entire 250-year history.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, it's the jokes write themselves. Unfortunately, I think they've been doing this all behind closed doors, and now they're just doing it all in the open for everyone to see, and only time will tell. Hope for the best and expect the worst. We'll see how it all goes. Thank you for all the updates, Jim.
My great pleasure. I love Geezy Truth News. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. Likewise, we're going to keep on